Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Interesting. All right, welcome to our Commemorative Air Force webinar series. Each week during the COVID shutdown, we've brought you a variety of stories that educate, inspire, and honor. Today's webinar will highlight some of the methods and the challenges in bringing history to our CAF family by showcasing the filmmakers behind the Rise Above films. With us today are filmmakers Adam White and Cara Martinelli White, or Cara White, who made numerous films about history and aviation. So, Adam, would you go ahead and give us a brief introduction of yourself, please?
Well, first, the Earth cooled. No, my name's Adam White. I'm from Northern Ohio and still live here, and went to film school, and then from there worked in the film industry, but always had an interest in a love in aviation and aerospace, and began to figure out that there might have been some stories that could be told here that weren't being told, and that I could do it in sort of an economical entry-level way, and using my skills and the skills of the people that I knew, that I could start making documentary films that weren't being really told on some of the channels that were around at the time. And I was on my way after that.
Excellent. That was brief, especially when you started with how the Earth cooled. Cara, what about you?
Well, I'm from Ohio, and we are based in Cleveland, Ohio. So hello from Cleveland. I grew up in Ohio, and then I moved to Seattle, Washington, and then to New York City, where I worked in television production for 5 years, doing lots of stuff with like HBO and A&E and Comedy Central. So a lot of the big stations that they have there. And then I moved back to Cleveland in 2010, and I met Adam because I was looking for work when I moved back, and I found his site for Hemlock Films, and the front page was just airplanes, and it's like aviation documentaries, and I'm like, whoa, what? Like, you can do that as a job? Like, I love aviation. Like, I want to do that. So I'm like, email sent, and we had coffee, and then he asked me to go flying the next day and
maintain professionalism and ask her out the next day.
And then we made our first documentary, which was the start of the Restorer series.
Yeah, we were off and rolling
in 2010, and that was with the Minnesota wing. But since I've been home, we both of us actually also work in the film industry. Besides just making our own documentaries and doing our own professional stuff that we do through Hemlock Films, we freelance as Adam's camera operator, and he's done work on Captain America and Carol, like he's done a bunch of stuff. It gets very exciting. So I'm like, that's your shot when we watch the movies. And then I also do work in set deck, which is part of the art department, and then I do a lot of the everything that you see in a scene that isn't part of the construction is something that I work with. So that's what we do as well. So we use a lot of our resources and know-how and personnel from the film industry to help us with our own stuff.
We use that on Rise Above WASP as well. The people that we meet and work with, and the techniques that we learn on that, because Rise Above WASP isn't a straight documentary, but it has a lot of narrative elements. So we're able to bring a lot of our narrative work over to the scenes that we shot for that film.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, I know we're going to learn more about that later, and I didn't realize we were going to also tell a love story along the way here. That's pretty cool. It's great that you have a shared passion for filmmaking. That's super. I'm Nancy McGee, and I'm the Vice President of Education for the Commemorative Air Force. So let's go ahead and let's talk about making films, because I think that's something that we don't hear much of when we're talking about the Commemorative Air Force and aviation. So the filming side of things, I think, is really interesting. Adam, in 2003, you released a documentary about the restoration of vintage warplanes, ranging from everything from what the F4U Corsair to B-17 Yankee Lady. And for that documentary, you received a lot of awards, which included an Emmy. And then, let's see, in 2010, you were telling me that you did a series by the same name. So what inspired you to make the film and the series? And then, Kara, how did you get involved?
Well, to do the film back in 2003, boy, did I not know what I didn't know. But I knew that in going to, we have a show here in Cleveland called the Cleveland Air Show. And it's largely dominated by jet teams. And I'd gone to that for all of my life. But then I would start to go to other air shows that had warbirds at it, that if somebody would bring in a B-17 like Yankee Lady, or go to Batavia, and where it was completely different, where you had older aircraft and it had lots of access to it, where you could go up and go up to the flight crews, you can do a donation and climb through the plane. And it was kind of the curtain being pulled back for me. And the stuff that I had been seeing on History Channel and Discovery up until that point didn't allow for that. And I thought, there's something here. There's some story here. So I began my march towards making a film in doing the restores by connecting myself with a man named Robert Odegaard, who has a long history. His whole family has a long history of warbird restoration based in Fargo, North Dakota. And that was a good one to start with. And as he did, and everybody after that would say, before we start, have you met so-and-so? And it would always be somebody of very, very a good suggestion. And that's how I actually got most of the stories in that film. And all the other films after that, particularly the Restore series, it was always somebody saying, you should meet. And it was a great source of another person. At that point, I didn't even know that the EAA existed, that the CAF existed. I had heard of none of these organizations, but I soon learned about it after that. And then in learning so much about that, I only had enough funds to do a 1-hour movie. But it was very obvious that it needed to be a series. So always planned on it. And then Kara and I went to an event at the Dayton Air Force Museum, and they said, hey, did you hear about this event we're going to have about the B-25s honoring the Doolittle Raiders?
There's going to be 17 B-25s there.
You guys should shoot it. And we said, I guess we're done waiting. We're going to make the series now.
It's like, oh, that's the perfect episode for the series we want to do. And
we're off and running.
Which is one of the nice things about the aviation community, is that everybody is eager to share their stories. So that's where we get, we had a lot of stories that we wanted to put into our series, and we had to kind of whittle them down. And we still have a stack of stories we want to do if we ever can get greenlit for season 2, i.e. get money for season 2.
You got a bag of money, email me.
And you like airplanes.
And where can we see season 1?
Season 1 is currently airing on PBS nationally. Each PBS station is different, so you have to check your local listings to see if it's airing, and not all the stations will air it.
They do their own thing.
Everybody can program as they wish. So you can if you can't find it, you can contact them and ask them when it will be airing. And if it's not planned to be aired, you can request it, because it is available to all PBS stations. Like it's free for all of them to grab it. They just have to choose to program it. So
also available on DVD and Blu-ray.
Also available on DVD and Blu-ray on flightcinema.com. With all our other titles, which you can see some of them behind us and our movie posters. But we did the first episode of The Restorers in 2010, which featured the Minnesota wing of the CAF. And that started a relationship with them because we have actually become pretty good friends with a lot of the people who work at that wing after that program. But
yeah, the relationship in filming there then, which we had, I had sort of fostered in between doing the 03 version and then the series. I did a documentary called Red Tail Reborn about the Tuskegee Airmen. and about the rebuild of the CAF's P-51C Mustang, which a lot of it was done at the Minnesota wing, and it was based there for some time, and was also had some work done in Fargo, North Dakota as well, at Jerry Beck's place. So one project begets the next, begets the next.
Absolutely. I think about Robert Frost in his poem, A Road Less Traveled, about how way leads to way, and you find yourself never coming back to the same place again.
True.
So obviously the restorers led you down quite a path, and you've started talking about that. Tell us more.
Yeah. Well,
About the series? Or
yeah, I mean, we did
about the path that you've been down from making the series Restorers to going into.
When we did the very first one, had a whopping crew size of 2. And we were, it was me and an audio guy that were boarding an airplane with credit cards to go shoot in Fargo in February. Everybody over at the Odegaard house was really impressed when we showed up. It was snowing so bad and cameras were freezing, and I swore to my audio guy that we'll finally shoot somewhere warm. And
we did eventually, yes.
well, we did. Yeah, we did. And our next shoot was in New Mexico, where we filmed with Frank Borman, and my audio guy almost got hospitalized. He got so sunburned. So careful what you ask for.
But yeah, you did Red Tail Reborn. Was that your second? That was after the Restorer.
Yeah, they did the Restorers, then Red Tail Reborn was in 06, and then we went into the Restorers series,
which also was a crew too for that one. Or did you have 3?
On Red Tail Reborn?
Yeah.
That was largely just a crew of 2 in filming in Minnesota and different places around the country, and then up in Fargo when they finally got the Mustang rebuilt and flying again. And then finally when we did that version of the Restorers, when we went to the Air Force Museum for that, we went up to a remarkable crew of 10.
Yeah, for that episode. But normally
that was like covering a sporting event, though.
Yeah, our whole series is usually just 4 of us, where there's the 2 of us. We have a sound guy and a friend of ours who she does assistant camera or is our second camera. So we're all very good friends. So we love traveling and doing those shoots together. But we have 5 episodes of the Restorers for the series, and there's this one is a special one because it's the whole show. The whole show is just following Miss Mitchell going to the Doolittle Raid reunion. But the rest of them are 3 stories each, and they all have a theme. So one is the Aviatrix, where it's got stories of women from history, including the WASP. And then
aviation destinations, and going to Kitty Hawk, and going to Rhinebeck, and going out to Chino, and then
aviation recovery, which is a little more like the Indiana Jones-ness of rescuing an airplane that's gone down somewhere. So
we tried to mix it up. That if you go to a large event, a large show, people like different things. Some are fighter jocks, some are like the transports, some like just talking to the veterans. And we wanted to do a show because if you're just talking about airplanes, my God, there's such a big swath, even from peacetime, civilian to conflict type aircraft. Yeah. So each episode theming it like that, we thought would at the very center of it, making a movie is really, really hard. So we wanted to do something that wouldn't bore us.
Yeah.
We would always be interested in it, and then through that, hopefully everybody else would find something too that they'd like.
Yeah. And we did Rise Above Tuskegee Airmen during the same time as filming the Restorers. And then we did Beyond the Powder, which is about the 1929 women's air race from Santa Monica to Cleveland, told through the modern day air race classic, which is what it is now. Most of the times when we pick stories to tell, we want to find a modern element so that way we can actually go film something and it's a little more relatable to people. So you're not just looking at archival stuff and talking heads. So we want to find something happening now, and then we can use that to tell the story of the past. So
it's very, as much as we can to sort of tell a story in a wider context, because up until 2003, you know, everything aviation related was jet teams at the Cleveland Air Show, or sort of the archival footage documentaries that Discovery Channel had at that time. And the word really wasn't getting out that there were things happening around the country and around the world, that people were volunteering and flying these aircraft. So, and we still find that unless you know about the Reno Air Races, you don't know about the Reno Air Races. Whereas, you know, I've never been to the Indianapolis 500, yet I know about it. Yeah. What we could do to sort of bring people to these stories, and that these stories are still happening and still flying, meant a lot to us.
Yeah, I mean, we have, his cousin is very into World War II history, and when his cousin's mom told him what we were doing for our project about the WASP, he's like, I think mom, you have that wrong. Women never flew airplanes in World War II. And she's like, no, I'm pretty sure that's what they said. And like up and down, he was like swearing that it never happened. And he is into this stuff. So it's always surprising to hear what people don't know. What did we do next after Beyond the Powder?
I think it was Rise Above WASP.
We did Rise Above WASP and Space Chase USA.
Yeah, as apropos today, after we did Rise Above WASP, and then we did a film for PBS called Space Chase USA about how the space program affects Cocoa Beach, Florida, and from back in the 60s through today. And I'm sure I would love to do an update about it today, mainly because then I could be at the Kennedy Space Center filming today. But still, it's a tremendous path from one to the other.
Yeah, yeah. And one thing we didn't mention about the restorers as well is we also feature CAF's Tour is one of the episodes. In
episode 1, story 1. Living History.
Living History. That's the other one we did. Yes, where we talk more about the people who do recreations to share the history. So
before this started, we were talking about, have we ever been to Houston for the show? And we have. We said we were busy. And
that's where we shot. That's where we filmed Torah.
That's what we were busy doing, was filming the Torah. So that took most of our time.
The filmmaking is incredibly challenging work, right? The behind the scenes details that few people have seen or even understand. It's long hours, it's tough conditions are a part of that. And filming aviation sequences can be especially challenging. But there's also some really cool opportunities along the way. So would you guys share some of your trials and triumphs with us?
Where do you want to start?
We'll end with the triumph so it doesn't turn into a downer. It is very hard to even work in the industry, even if you're at the highest level, working on Marvel movies, or you're producing your own stuff at sort of a more ramen noodle budget. It's difficult work every day. So for us to take on these stories, it's very clearly something that we believe in, and that pulls us through the day when we're doing these projects. If you had, no production has an unlimited amount of funds. So the creativity that you have in your head has to somewhere on the graph meet with realistic budgets and assets that are attached to it. So if we're doing a narrative film that calls for, 400 trainers on the ramp at Avenger Field in 1944, well, those don't exist. So what are we going to do? How can we do it? How can we tell this story and still have the breadth that we would like, but not make it, for lack of a better word, don't make it look dumb. So you do what you can when it comes to some of that. In shooting at Avenger Field in Sweetwater, the extras' shoes were melting to the ramp. One of our volunteers that was working on the crew, and she's fairly young, in college and from Texas, that she had some heat stroke. Us northern people, we tough through it, probably just from adrenaline. Yeah, you get out into the environment sometimes, and it's difficult.
Yeah. It's always a challenge and an adventure, for sure.
Yeah.
We spend months in advance preparing for when we, especially doing a narrative shoot. There's a historical narrative shoot like Rise Above WASP. There's a lot of little elements that have to go into it because it is a movie at that point, so you have to think about everything that's going to go on screen.
And creative and story. If the picture that you have there of the three ladies in costume, that's, for months we're talking about what women to cast, what their hair will look like, how their hair looks like in 1943, what their outfits will be, what the parachute will be, because while the story of Rise Above WASP is not about their parachute or anything like that, but we want something like that to not distract from the narrative that we're trying to accomplish.
I mean, we are both fans of history, so we tend to typically know more than most normal viewers. So if we are watching something and something's wrong, we tend to get pulled out of it. And then you're like, oh, all I'm thinking about is that thing that didn't look right. And now I'm not, because I'll be like, wait, what year is it? Like, wait, what? And then I'm trying to figure stuff out. So as much as we could with this project in particular and our budget, working as any business person will know that you have to work within your budget and your resources. So we were limited on certain things, and especially even like he mentioned, the parachute, we could only find 3. I think maybe only 2
on Earth.
I mean, there's got to be more than that, but
that we had access to,
that we had time to find. So stuff like that is definitely a challenge for us. But then once we're on set, like he mentioned, like the heat, it was very windy when we were there.
So some of the tools that we would normally use, we can't use. But you're there for particular reasons. Like, well, why did you shoot there? It's like, well, if I turn the camera and have a close-up of that WASP by the aircraft, you see the 100 miles of nothing around them. And that's why we're there. That's
Right.
what you want to see.
Yeah. But I mean, we do all our air-to-air filming for all of our projects, and that is also another challenge for us. I mean, I know it's more for him because he's operating the camera for the most part. I mean, every once in a while one gets thrown in my hand, but
in the work versus the high points, that a lot of people, and we always have to remind ourselves about this, that like today we're on a mission, we're going to shoot a T6 out the window of a Twin Beach. Cool. All right, that's where our morning is. But we always have to remind ourselves, like, that's some people's bucket list to ever get to do that. That we don't have normal lives. So we have that as the high point, but also at the same time, when I'm hanging out the back of Devil Dog, shooting Fifi, and there's nothing in between me and Fifi's nose because we've taken the glass out, and filming her, that the enjoyment is there, but it's pushed sort of 5 layers behind your brain because you're looking at all of those engines burning gas at $10, $20, $30, $40. Like, get your work done. Don't be sightseeing. Just get the work done and tell everybody we're done so they can land.
Yeah. And then you get like the 10 seconds of going, oh, this was neat.
Yeah, about 10 seconds where you can really enjoy, like, wow, I can't believe I'm here. Okay, back to work.
My very first Warbird flight was for when we were filming this, and it was because we were out of people, and the Miss Mitchell crew was like, so who's coming on board with us for the flyover?
This is the 17 ship flyover of B-25s over the Doolittle Raiders.
Over the Air Force Museum.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh yeah, let me see. And he looks at me and he's like, I wasn't planning on sending anybody on there. He's like, I have an extra camera. Do you want to go? And I was like, yeah.
So that's our first Warbird ride. It was in a formation like that.
Was like me being like, this is really cool. Oh wait, I'm supposed to be filming it. Like I like holding the camera.
Pay attention.
I'm like, oh yeah, okay. And then it's like, get everything that you can. And then once it's done, I was like, oh, this is really neat. And you get to like enjoy it, which was really just me when we were like circling the airfield trying to land.
And you can watch your footage later. A lot of our memories are based around, or at least mine, is based around just the footage that we shot as a way to remember how I remembered it. It's like, I'm not even sure I have my own memories anymore. I just have the movies that we shot.
But I think one of my absolute favorite stories of us being this lucky to be able to do these things was when we were at Avenger Field and we recreated that famous shot of the 3 WASP who are standing underneath the why am I like
the arch?
It's a sign. It's not.
We call it the arch, but yeah,
it's a sign. The Aviation Enterprise
with Fifi above it.
So we wanted to recreate that and have the scene, and then we would have the WASP T6 fly overhead with our actresses standing underneath. So the first thing we had to do was find the road, which the WASP Museum hooked us up with the FBO there, and
we were on the Sweetwater on the Avenger
Field property, and he drove us around and took us out. And we were like, oh yeah, that road over there looks great because it just looks like nothing, and we could use that. And he's like, oh yeah, he's driving his truck around, and I was like, oh cool, can I hop out? And he's like, oh no. He's like, there are rattlesnakes all over here. He's like, I'll drive you over there. And I'm like,
rattlesnake capital of the world.
Oh boy. So we found that, and then at the end of that road is the Sweetwater Gun Club, and we wanted to film there on Sunday, and that's like their big shooting day.
They go to church, then they go shooting.
And so we had to contact them and ask them very nicely if we could close the road.
We could shut down their gun club for half a day.
Yeah, like their prime shooting time when they would all be out there shooting. And they were very kind and let us do that. And then we had to recreate the sign, which our art department team, Lena Holler and Kirsten Huok, were awesome and designed and built this sign with the help of a Sweetwater sign company.
That could stand up in the Sweetwater wind.
So it was these big metal posts that they had to come like auger into the ground for us. And then they printed up the sign, and like we had them out in a bucket truck, weathering it, which is our code for putting like brown paint on it to make aging it, making it look older than it was. So we have all these elements that we've come together. And then Adam worked with Bill Shepard with the CAF and all the pilots, and they were doing wagon wheels all around the field so we could have that happening in the background.
You had to make it look like it was a training base in 1943. As these 3 women were arriving at the base. So at 5 in the morning, everybody is launching the aircraft for a scene that ultimately comes down to doing close-ups with actresses conveying their hopes and fears of becoming WASP. But in the background, you have all of West Texas and the Commemorative Air Force aircraft flying overhead trying to paint the scene.
Yeah, and he's on a walkie with organizing when the T6 should come over the sign, so that because we were timing it with our actresses are doing their thing, the timing has to work so that the camera, because we're on a crane, the crane comes up and it pulls out so you can see the plane fly over right as soon as they're doing their thing. So that took us,
I think it's in our trailer.
The first take is actually one of my favorites because it genuinely surprised the actresses, and they just had this like joy on their face, which I was like, oh, that's perfect for these women coming in, and they're like, oh God, we're gonna get to fly that. I'm so excited.
Because the actors, sorry, go ahead.
I think that might be the take we ended up using.
That is the take we used.
God, I loved it. But I think my other favorite thing about that whole experience is that our whole crew, our film crew, don't really do anything with airplanes. So like this was all new to them, and them being out there while we're setting up, and all the planes are doing their wagon wheel, and they're buzzing over the sign like right above us. They're all just like, "Oh my God, did you see that?"
Very giddy. I mean, this is a crew. This is a crew that we've done explosions and fight sequences in the Avengers.
Yeah, they
when they
work
shot
on big movies.
But having
they were very excited.
having a training World War II aircraft try to pull the paint off that sign as it was buzzing overhead. That was very exciting for the crew.
Yeah, and I know a lot of our takes got ruined by the audio.
By
Because everybody was cheering and laughing, including me.
So.
It's fine.
Well,
cleaned it
you
up.
talked about some of the things that you've done in making a film. Talk us through the stages of creating a film.
I'd like to point out that the picture you just brought up, that is when Kara is pointing to get out of the truck where the snakes are.
Like, can I get out here? He's like, no.
Yeah, a famous person once said the hardest part of filmmaking is whatever stage you're at in it. But it's all very, very difficult all the time. That the math is you should be prepared to be with that project for 5 years. So you better pick one that you like.
Yeah, which is good because that's all we really do choose to is something that we're really passionate about. Because otherwise, I think I would go mad. Like, oh, I'm working on this again.
But in doing something like this, particularly something that's a period piece that has a lot of history that we're trying to convey, that the process of filming, going through the concept of it, the initial concept was fairly straightforward when we were, in particular with the CAF, but with any, for the Rise Above WASP, but with any project. The concept was pretty straightforward, but then the fact that there hadn't been a lot ever made about the WASP program, so to decide what you're going to do, it was a little bit of a blank canvas for both us and the CAF, the client, as determining what part of the WASP story is going to be told.
Yeah, I think that was definitely, I mean, in this project in particular, the biggest challenge. Like all our other ones, the concept is like, oh, that's a cool story, we want to tell that story. This had a lot more weight to it, and we knew we had a lot of boxes we had to tick. And
in 28 minutes.
In 28 minutes, and we're telling the story of the WASP, which really, I mean, there's documentaries and we all know that because we're into this stuff, but we kind of had to be like, okay, it's not the first time like on this big of a scale that somebody's going to see this. And we had the target audience, of course, was kids with an emphasis on young girls, middle school to high school. And we started our process we were able to go interview all the WASP across country. And we would,
which is a pretty awesome
whole separate story.
You go and actually talk to the WASP to get the information directly from them.
Yeah, we would spend one day with each of them. We would go to their home and do the interviews. And at night, when we go back to the hotel, I would sit and I would take notes on the things that we didn't cover in the interview. And just like ideas and thoughts, because I had to write a script from this. And I was like, okay, like, oh, like that's a kind of cool concept. Like, I like that idea. And I think maybe it was because I was struggling, because I was trying to write something originally. And I was like, oh, it just feels so generic. Like, oh, I feel like we're just like encompassing everything. We're like, oh, the WASP were brave and they were this and this and this. And I was like, no, it doesn't really translate to like this personal, heartfelt story that would really resonate with kids. And
which we would want to do with any group of veterans.
Right. And so, and it's hard too, because there wasn't a whole lot written on them besides, you know, like the basic, everything that, you know, when you're doing research on these sorts of things, nothing got too in depth on anything initially. So I think it was on maybe the second or third interview, I was like, oh, this is, you know, this is really tough. And they're just coming out more different. Every time we interview one, I was like, I feel they're just more different than the next. And he's just like, yeah, Kara, all women are different. And I was like, right, duh. So at that moment, it like allowed me to expand out in my thoughts and ideas of what we could express in this. But from there, after we interviewed all the WASP, we kind of used that, and then we were picking and choosing stories that they would tell us, where we're like, oh, that would be a really good scene. And then we would kind of have to alter it. Because in the end, what we wanted to do was ideally would have been nice to do a short narrative, but you can't tell their whole story in that way. So we did this short little narrative with a little girl who's a WASP who grows up and flies the most challenging, most technologically advanced airplane at the time,
which was a B-29.
And so that was,
excuse me, part of the development process is also what assets do we have available? And since the Commemorative Air Force was the ones that were tasking us with doing the movie, we very early on said, okay, what do we have? What do we have in our bag? We have T6 that is a WASP T6, and we also have a B-29, which the WASP flew every aircraft in the inventory. So we could have picked a lot, but the fact that a B-29 was going to be possible, that governed our whole character arc. That you could say this is where the WASPs, this is where women and girls started their flying journey, and then the B-29 could be the appropriate sort of big ending.
And I mean, while we're aware that not a lot of the WASP actually got to fly the B-29,
it's more of the representational.
It's more about like, this is like, they got to the highest point. And it was such a good natural story about how the concept was that they wanted the women to fly it to show that it was, the men would get over it and fly it. Like, it's so easy, the women are flying it, why aren't you doing it? And it just felt natural for this, what the theme of the story was. So that's kind of how we ended up coming up with that concept. And then we had to, then the next thing we had to do was storyboard it, which I had to create my own storyboards because of the screen is not like, that aspect ratio is, that's the only screen that's like that, essentially.
The place that the film was going to, one of the places was going to be in the Rise Above trailer, which has been touring for several years around the country with the Tuskegee Airmen story. So now we're doing that again, but we're taking the project had a lot more complications to it on how to tell a story with a wraparound curved screen. How do you shoot a close-up? How do you
do coverage?
How do you cover a scene, which we didn't really do in the first Rise Above? So now that we were doing all these sequences that we're going to have narratives, now we had to sort of, we shot tests and did storyboards on how we were going to be able to accomplish this.
Yeah, and as far as the wraparound screen goes, like, that's a little bit easier to keep us following everything that we've been taught on how to make a movie. It's just in slightly different format, but the CAF had requested that they wanted to possibly put these in a dome environment, and like an Omnimax essentially. And we're like, okay,
that's never been done before.
That's cool, but trying to keep filmmaking,
again,
storytelling, how everything you watch ever is done in a dome format just gets weird because you're cutting away from this natural environment. And it's like he said, how do you shoot a close-up? So we are having arguments daily because we both have different visions in our head on how like that has to work technically. So I think we did end up spending one day in Sweetwater when we were there before we filmed doing test shots, because there were shots that I thought these would be really great epic shots for this movie.
Yeah, but
and then we get out there with the camera and I was like, oh, that just looks really awkward. And
it doesn't fit.
like,
and every production does tests like that. If it's something that's going to be kind of squirrely or odd, they like to, movies will shoot a test when you don't have 35 people on the payroll while you're sitting trying to work it out.
And someone else out there.
So we would shoot the test. So because we're only going to have one shot at this, particularly when all the aircraft are in the air. So we did do some tests to sort of figure it out, and then basically every scene that we shot of the film, we shot it 3 different ways. One for the trailer, one for a possible dome down the road, and also one for sort of a normal flat movie theater mode. So
so we have all 3 versions for whenever
if
anyone's like, we want to show it in this kind
if it's required, we have
it. Because after we did Rise Above Tuskegee Airmen, we only shot it in the one format for the theater, and then there was
we didn't know what we didn't know.
There was a lot of requests for like additional materials for things that was like, oh well, we don't really have it in that format. So on this one we were like,
we got a little smarter.
We're just shooting it every way. So our poor actresses had to
do all their scenes 3 times.
Yeah, plus the multiple takes that I had to do anyhow. So by the end it clicked along pretty good because they just were,
they knew, okay, I got to do a flat one. Okay, I got to do a dome one.
But that was our storyboard process, I guess. And then we entered pre-production, which was us trying to gather all our assets. So we knew we needed wardrobe for everybody, and we needed props and sets. And so we worked with our art director, Lena Haller, and she helped us. She came up with the concepts for what we were designing and like what she was able to get on hand for budget. And then we worked with, we actually got a lot of our stuff from Liberty Aviation Museum that's here in Ohio.
They have an unreasonable collection of these things, and
They have a lot of stuff.
the nice part of it was a lot of it was here's some uniforms. They're probably not going to fit, which that was perfect for the story because the WASP didn't have anything that fit ever.
Yeah.
So
So I guess that part was the easy
That was pretty good.
acquisition on that. But they have a lot of like the reproductions of stuff, but they work great. And they were kind enough to donate them to the cause. So which we thank them, down thank them, and they let us use one of their parachutes, which was huge because we only had two, and the other one came from the CAF Minnesota wing.
Right.
So we were able to gather those assets, and then
And
and we were planning our travel, which we had. Adam and I drove from Cleveland, Ohio, to Sweetwater, Texas, which is a 20-hour drive
with 3 departments worth of stuff.
in a big pass van that just loaded up all our tools, camera, sound equipment. Like it was just loaded.
I wish we had pulled over and they'd see all the military boots and uniforms.
Oh yeah, because we had like crates of boots. Like it was just, we had a lot of stuff. So it was more cost effective for us to drive it all than to ship it.
So we got to Sweetwater, and while we only filmed for 2 days there, we were there for 10 days doing the pre-production of, they had World War II style buildings that were there, but we had to populate them once again. So if you have just a simple scene of 3 WASP pilots standing around a desk talking about their flights for the day, you have to not have an empty room. Now you need a desk and the maps and everything that you would ever see in the background during that time, including out the windows, now has to be thought about and considered and brought by probably us.
Well, for one of the scenes when we were, I'm just going to interject with this one story. When they're in a ready room planning something, planning whatever, and we had to clear some of the tree branches from outside. And there was a wasp nest in the tree branches, and the wasps attacked our crew.
The crew got attacked by wasps during the WASP movie.
But anyhow, so that was just, I mean, that's just one part of this. We also had to do production we shot in Dallas with the B-29 right before the air show there.
Yeah, do you have the ability to go back one slide?
I do.
That's on the left-hand side as part of the, you have to work with the schedule that you're handed. The B-29, which was a very critical set of scenes, or a critical scene in the film, we had to shoot it when we could, because Fifi has a tour and has a schedule and a maintenance schedule. So they carved out 2 days that we could shoot it, and it was going to be in Dallas. Well, here we all come, and everybody flew to Dallas for that particular time. Because it wasn't going to happen after that. She was disappearing into the paint shop for 5 months, I think, after that. So that would be when we all arrived there to shoot with the women in the cockpit there. So thank you.
Yeah, and that was a decent location for us to not. Kind of looks World War II-ish. There's not a lot of stuff around.
We could hide the modern.
We could
things,
manipulate it and like we had to digitally erase a bunch of the modern airplane or airport stuff on that one as well. And that one was a little easier with the uniform gathering of the uniforms. Anyway,
Yes.
The WASP jacket that the lead WASP is wearing is my coat that he bought for me years ago. Well, I know the stitching and everything wasn't completely accurate. It was close enough that we were going to be able to find a World War II WASP leather jacket. So we sometimes we just kind of work the best as we can with stuff. But
And things slipped through the cracks when we were filming with the B-29. The crew was good enough to take out the modern radio headsets that they could find, and GPSs and things that they could that make all flying aircraft safe now. But we were so busy that we didn't notice the modern push to talk switches that were still on the yokes. So on one of our close-ups, I was still in there, and that is going to an 8-foot tall screen. It would be very noticeable. So we ended up having to digitally erase that after the fact. But
yeah, and we ended up losing our actress late in the day, and we still owed a shot of a close-up of the hands on the yoke. And our script supervisor, who is in charge of continuity, went around checking all the women's hands.
Show me your hands.
To see whose hands were closest to hers, so that we could.
This is not just indicative of a museum, a scrappy museum movie. A friend of ours worked on a movie called Captain Marvel, and they had already sent the actress home, and they needed a close up of her hand. So she got to be Brie Larson's hands for the day. So it happens. It happens to the best of us.
In the preview, she's like, "That's my hand."
I have superpowers in that shot.
Yeah. Anyways, so there's a shot of I had to sit in and do that last shot. But like that's challenging. That happens a lot. What aspect were we talking about?
Filming.
Pre-production.
No.
Production.
Yes. Do you? Sorry, I know we've been going on for a while. Do you have questions at this point? We can talk for. Interrupt us because we can talk for about 4 or 5 hours.
Well, there's lots I want to add in here because I'm an underwater filmmaker, so there's lots of things that I find in parallels. But nevertheless, talk to us about the filming and post-production. We'll wrap up this slide and move on with our story.
I think we were sort of already talking about the filming. That no matter what scene you're doing, it sort of falls into a category of you shoot a wide shot, then close up, and then you move on. And all of that was still true with something like this. It's just now when you have WASP attacking the crew and you have airplanes that are taxiing or flying in the background, just everything gets longer. That you did a wide shot where somebody says a line and then you're like, that was great, but the airplane's not in the right spot. Everybody go circle around and we'll try it again. So the second you introduce operations like that, whether it's that or race cars or sailboats or anything like that, that you double the time that anything is going to be required. Yeah, especially with the resets on stuff if it's long. Doing that stuff just takes a while. And at that point, you're thankful that you have a crew that's professional and that you have a cast that can roll with the punches and won't be grumpy that they got to do it again because the antique aircraft wasn't in the right position in the sky. That they knew what they were being a part of, and they were tremendous professionals. Right, and that's one of the things that takes a lot of the stress and worry and the edge off of when you're in production is that you've already done your work in pre-production of hiring the people that that you can trust to do the job and that will do a good job. So if you do all the work on the front end, when you get to the shoot, should be painting by numbers. It's gonna be way easier than it would have been if you hadn't put all that work in initially. So having a good crew is key because you absolutely can just trust them to do their thing, and then you can just focus on what you need to be worried about. And the other scene we never talked about filming was the one we did here in Ohio with the Barnstormer sequence, which is that we had got a 1929 Travel Air from he's outside of Columbus. Dewey Davenport has a 1929 Travel Air that we also used for Beyond the Powder. And so we were able to film that, and we also had to populate the field with extras. Here's a pro tip for people that make movies, that if you have family members that don't quite understand how involved doing photography and filmmaking are, put them in the background as extras. Then they get to experience just how long the day is, and that you're not there just for fun time and sipping lattes with Brad Pitt. That this is really, really hard. It's very hard. Had my parents in the background of that scene, and Kara's family was in the background of that scene as well. Yeah, my dad was like, "Oh, this is really hard," and I'm like, day.
This is a short day.
Yeah.
Like we've been here for 5 hours. That is nothing.
That's not even a half day.
Yeah. And a lot of our friends from high school were in it. So it was kind of fun that we were able to like include a lot of the people who are in our lives and they could come. We brought our friends to work. That's what we ended up doing.
Okay, so you've got everything in the can, or you think you've got all your shots, and you go into post-production. Our audience probably doesn't know rules of thumb on how long post-production takes.
It all sort of boils down to man hours, that if it's just 2 of you, it's going to take longer than if there were 30 of you in a building cutting on it. It's also.
Oh, that's not fair. There's people who also worked on our post-production that we're not in-house.
Yeah, I have to get to that.
I know.
That's when you have a particular deadlines associated with it, then you start spreading the work out. Where for the post-production, that both of us did the lion's share of the editing of it, but when it comes to, we mentioned doing digital work on it, digital effects for it, we had some 60 shots that we had to either change the nose art on airplanes or erase cell towers and windmills, or just put sky out the side of the windows. And some of that we could do here, some of it we dispersed throughout the country to be able to do that. And then one of the largest helps or collaborations that we had was for our musical score. That once we got our picture locked, that we sort of fired it off to a composer that we knew, and said, we want a big sweeping orchestral score, and go.
Well, it's a little bit more than that. I mean, we would have meetings like this. Since he was in LA, we would just do video conference, but we would go through the whole movie scene by scene and be like, this is what they're feeling right now. This is what the music I want. Like, this should be like really quiet and reserved, or like, this is, like their moment of triumph. So the music reflects the feelings, which I think really, like, without that music in there,
It's probably a month and a half of work associated with the music, from when he first started, from our first meetings to when it was recorded by a full orchestra on 2 different continents.
Yeah.
That's,
surprisingly, you can get orchestra in Macedonia for not that much money.
For a reasonable
price. And then they did the big band stuff down in Nashville. So that's the music part. And then I mentioned that we had to digitally erase all the modern elements, which we're capable of doing.
We can do some.
And then we had to remove the nose art of Fifi and put Ladybird on, which is has Fifinella logo.
That was the WASP B29 nose art.
So that was a little bit more challenging, and we outsourced that. And so there's a lot of digital work. There's a lot of just picking, and I mean, I guess I had all the script written before, so at that moment for the edit, we just kind of had to plug and play essentially everything that we already shot.
And then you finally mix it, and then you export it in the format required, and then you premiere it at the biggest air show in the world.
Yeah, so several months of work. And
all right,
because it's in a theater that we can't test it unless we're there, which is not here with us. So
we've watched it for the first time, not with we were able to see it in advance, but we're on the grounds at Oshkosh, so there's not a whole lot we can do about anything. So we were there on the same week that all of the CAF and the FAA and Tuskegee Airmen and everybody got to see it.
And one thing I did not get to mention when we were talking about production and reproduction and all that is we did get a bunch of women to volunteer to be extras for us, to be WASP, including a couple that were granddaughters of the WASP, and that were pilots themselves or were military. So it was really great to be able to have.
There were some B-1 bomber guys that came by.
Yeah, it was an incredible day, and I just feel very guilty that we were so busy making the thing that I couldn't talk or hang out with all these incredible people that showed up to do it. So it was just like, I think.
But it's because when you first posted, like, we need extras, people jumped out of their socks to try and do this. Yeah. So it's sort of a testament that how desperately enthusiastic people were to try and help with this.
And how special this story is for people. Because, like, I know it was like one of my favorite days ever. I'm like, I can't even imagine if it was my grandma, like a bunch of people were portraying my grandmother. Like for those two women who showed up, I regret very much that I didn't have time to talk with everybody. But that was great that they helped out. We had a lot of help with the WASP Museum and Carol Kane there. Could not have shot that movie without them. And I feel like I'm giving like
A credit.
an
Thanks.
award speech right now where I'm like, hold on.
Don't cut me off.
Don't cut me off. All the pilots and the airplanes that they brought, because all these people are volunteers. These are things we did not pay for.
Some were CAF, most were CAF, some were not.
Yeah, and then yes, and TWU was awesome, and I was there several times at their
Texas
archive.
Women's University.
Texas Women, because they have the WASP archive, and I was digging through their photos. They were great, and then since we're in Ohio, like I just be like, can you scan this photo for me? Can you scan this photo
That's
for me?
probably a photo from them.
That might be one of them. They literally hundreds, I don't 500 maybe photos they sent to us, and they had to be really high res. So I know it was
going on a big screen.
kind of a pain for them. And Kate Landeck, who's also Dr. Kate Landeck at TWU, helped us a lot with like our fact checking, and we were just very appreciative of all that help, because I think again, it's just people were very excited about being able to help tell the story that people are so passionate about.
Wait, go back one.
No.
That's the storyboards that Kara drew.
They helped me.
I like it. So part of this, you guys did a lot of background work, and you got to interview WASP, and then you had some key characters when this film was premiered. What was that like to show films, because you've done this several times with Rise Above WASP and Rise Above Red Tail, you've shown it to the people who lived it. What is that like?
I think I had mentioned to you that I'm curious what it'll be like to have a premiere where that doesn't happen, where I can just show it and not have to wonder if I portrayed somebody's life correctly.
Yeah.
It does wake you up at night multiple times a week throughout the entire process, that have you portrayed and done justice for these, in this case for these women, but I've done it with the Tuskegee Airmen, I've done it with other aviation folks and families through my career. So this was, it doesn't get easier, but it's familiar to show these women. And we showed them some of the women. We showed a halfway done cut of the film, and they said we were getting it right. So yeah, we knew we were sort of on the right track.
Which was kind of interesting, because when we showed that to them, we had watched another documentary about the WASP before that, and one of them was like, "Wait, didn't we just watch a documentary?" And their kids were like, "No, this is going to be different. We're going to watch a different one." And when it was over, she's like, "Oh yeah, that was really different." And here's some of the scenes that that's the scene underneath the welcome arch that we were talking about, that none of this has ever really been portrayed on film before. And that's our intrepid leader with her cowboy boots on. That was because they told me we were rattlesnakes, and then I had to wear cowboy boots. So I went and got them.
But also these the actresses that are associated with this, they were taking this as serious as a heart attack to portray this. So they did their own research when it came to these characters. So when they're sitting in the right seat of Fifi, portraying the WASP that were flying B-29s at the time, they were paying attention. They were trying to make it right, because they knew the weight that was associated with this.
Yeah, I did a lot of work with them, just going over how, like, their feelings, their thoughts, and their fears, and their what the things they wanted to achieve. So it was kind of interesting, just being like, this is very rarity in Hollywood, or in films mostly, because what is it like? I feel like women in film is like the same percentage as women in aviation. We are definitely in the minority, but it was interesting for me to be able to sit with just 3 other women and discuss a lot of the same things they were going through, or things that we are still going through. So I told him, it's like, some of this is really easy, because I'd be like, this is what's going on, and this is what was happening. And I'm like, and you're a woman. And they're like, yeah, I got it. Okay. Like, I know how to do this. So on that aspect, it was really pretty easy to direct them on this, but they did a wonderful job in trying to learn as much as they could, so that they could portray them as accurately as possible.
And of course, like everyone ever, they had never heard of the WASP before. So it was part of the education.
Yeah. And one of the things that I didn't get a chance to say was that when we were we've shown the movie to all the WASP that are in it. We sent them copies to their home so that they could see it, in case of them not getting to see it in the trailer before unfortunate things happened. So we got, and I got a message one day from Nell Bright, and she's like, "Hey, I just watched the movie." And she's like, "I just wanted to say thank you for telling our story so accurately." And I was like, oh God, like, I think that was the one moment that I was just like, oh, the relief. Because like he said, up all night, like I was just up all night when we were finishing this movie going like, I hope we got it right. Like, I hope, like, I just want it, like, yes, the whole point of their story is to be inspirational for young kids, that they can rise above their challenges. And I was like, okay, I think we got that. But then I was like, I want them to like it.
You absolutely did. I was one of those in the audience when it was premiered, tearing up because it was just so well done and a great honor. So where can our audience see this film now? What's happening with it? I know that things have changed with COVID, so when can we see it?
This is going to really be its sort of coming out year. That it was going to start in March, and it was going to be across the country and be at AirVenture, which all those things are not transpiring. So as how when it will start touring is a little bit of a moving target, but the website that you have up there, cafriseabove.org, would have the schedule as the most up-to-date information as to when and where that trailer will be screening the film. I have not checked it in the past few days to see where we're at with the country opening, because I don't know what events are still on the books or not, but that would be the best place to get that info.
Yeah.
Awesome. And while you're mentioning that, I'll just say that if you look at riseabovewasp.org or you go to their Facebook page, there's going to be a webinar tonight and Facebook Live of General McGee talking about being a Tuskegee Airman, and that's going to be narrated and moderated by Doug Rosendahl. So that'll be something really to look forward to. And I think that happens at 5 o'clock, and I'll double check that before we're done on Central Standard Time. Wow, so I know our audience probably has tons of questions at this point, and I'm going to turn it over to Leah Block behind the scenes here, our voice of God, to read out some questions for you guys.
So one question is, what platform app did you guys use to edit the film?
It was Premiere Pro that we edited most of it. A lot of the digital effects were done on several different types of platforms across the country. Many I don't really know, but Adobe Premiere is where we edited the majority of it.
Yeah, when it comes to the effects, we don't really know what they were using. We would just send it to them.
Sometimes After Effects, something proprietary. I just wanted the done shots back. That's it.
At what point did the CAF review the film?
The CAF was part of the process from the beginning, from the concept to the script writing. So they were. And that was actually where they were the most involved. Once the filming started, and this is sort of probably how it should work. Once filming started, it's difficult to turn the boat to say, I don't want to do a scene like this, let's do it like this, which is possible. But once the scripting was done, then they let us go, and then we showed them cuts along the way, and maybe there's some suggestions here and there, but CAF was pretty involved right from the get-go.
Yeah, we worked with them on the outline. It was actually a very much longer process than I think I was prepared for. But we worked with outline with them, and then I sent them several drafts of the script, and then once we had script approval, we're like, okay, script is locked, but it will, like, everything we've ever worked on, I was like, the words might change, like it's gonna change while you're
Words are
filming
changed,
it.
but if we're saying to ourselves, we're shooting at Avenger Field and we're doing these 3 scenes, that's what we're doing. So
Because when you're in the middle of filming something on any movie, once you get into the scene and you have people actually portraying what's written on the page, sometimes it feels really awkward.
yeah, you're
when
like,
they
oh,
say
that's too wordy, or
it's too wordy, or the words sound funny, and you're just like, okay, we're gonna, you know, like you just alter it a little. So I guess we are all very clear a lot of the times where we're like, it will change. It's not going to be giant, but like, so you know, like, don't be upset if there's like little teeny tiny differences. So and then they got the rough cut, so like they were involved throughout the process.
So this is kind of a tough question, but I'll set it up for you. The end of World War II was 75 years ago, and you guys are a young couple that have this bridge between history and, you know, what's going on today. How important do you think it is that the stories from World War II are able to make it down to this upcoming generation, which more than likely won't know anybody who was in World War II?
Yeah.
It's never not important.
Mm-hmm.
It sort of goes through cycles, that the 90s had sort of a fair amount, and then it slacked off a little bit, and now it's coming up again. It's always important to tell these stories and to tell them in a way that's relatable, to have characters that people can relate to their same wants and fears and needs, and put them on a stage like that, and then people can imagine themselves within that context and maybe challenge themselves as to what they would do within that.
Yeah, and one of the most important parts of not forgetting these stories and pass them down to the younger generations is that, I mean, obviously we all know all the things that people went through at that point, but they need to know that what we went through as a country, what the world went through, even down on the microscopic level of each individual story where there are millions, to understand what it was like for them and put themselves in those places so that hopefully these terrible things don't happen again. Always that phrase, if you don't learn from history, you're doomed to repeat it. So I think I get frustrated sometimes too when things happen in modern day and I'm like, did nobody learn from World War II?
Over and over
Read
again.
something.
Over and over again, you see stuff like that.
But that's just me getting upset at the world. But it's absolutely a huge value for them to know these stories. Just even
and to relate it within, and to make it live and breathe and not seem like a painting of the ancient Egyptians. In doing that, you have that direct connection with history. In doing Red Tail Reborn and interviewing some of the people down at Tuskegee, Alabama, and having an interview with them, and while we're talking afterwards, he's telling stories of his family about him knowing slaves. And I'm talking to this gentleman who knew slaves, and there's that direct line through time, that it's not something that's in the far distant path that's unrelatable.
It's much closer to us than we think it is. Even if you don't know that person, it is, yeah, you know somebody who did.
Hey kids, there were stories before the internet.
I think it also helps too that you guys have told the story in a narrative format as well as making it into a documentary. So it blends it together to make it something that a younger audience would appeal to. So, you know, I think it's really well done in that respect, and that certainly makes a difference when you're trying to connect with a younger audience. Yeah,
absolutely. And that was one of our another challenge was for this project, is that we have to get kids interested. You know, if that's our primary audience, so you want them to be interested in it. And one of the things is that they're most going to identify with is watching a narrative. I did a lot of research. This is going to sound weird. Did a lot of research on middle school girls and like where their interest in science drops out on the step. And just trying to kind of figure that out, and how we would shape our story to maybe help inspire them. And we always, up and down, we're always like, representation matters. I think young girls see somebody that looks like them, just even with the Tuskegee Air.
Okay, Leah, I'm not sure if it's from my end of the computer or your end or Adam and Kara's, but I didn't hear any of that last statement there.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I got some messages too. It looks like just that last little answer to that question went. I guess it froze. So we can.
Oh, can you hear us now?
Yes.
We can.
Oh, okay. It was the most amazing answer ever, but we should move on.
I can't remember what it was.
Yeah.
The edited version of the webinar does not include that statement. Someone asked the question, could you explain a little more how you filmed inside the B-29 with the green screen?
Well, a lot of the time we love doing stuff for real. That when we did Beyond the Powder, we put an actress up in the air in a travel air and filmed her in there because it looks the best. But yeah,
we totally did the old. If you watched old movies about airplanes, where like they would just mount the camera and be like, "Record now, go fly the plane." So that's what we did with her. Just mounted the camera on there, send her up.
With the B-29, that's not possible. That the cost of flying the aircraft is too much, and just from the widescreen dome aspect of how we were shooting it. So we would have to wrap the outside of the aircraft with green screen on the outside and then shoot the plates later, the background shots that we could then composite in at a later time, which some of them were from other aircraft, the background plates. Some of them actually were from Fifi aloft with cameras pointed out the window so we could get the correct perspective. So you'd see the props or the wings outside different.
Yeah, that was a whole other argument between us. I'd be like, the wings don't look right. And he's like, no, this is what they look like in a picture. We need to adjust those video angles of things. And then he's like, no one's gonna, he's like, it's on the very far side of the screen. Who cares? I'm like, So we get in a lot of arguments about little teeny tiny details.
That nobody, and I mean nobody on earth is ever going to notice. But that's, in general, that's how we did it.
Yeah.
We shot her on the ground and went through the process, again, using storyboards. So we're making sure that we're filling all the content boxes that we need to, and then go back home and have either us or somebody else composite them together.
Yeah. And then the last question is, were most of the aircraft provided by the CAF?
The vast majority were, and then friends contacted friends for them to bring something, bring more in, because there was the right vintage and the right type of aircraft. Whenever possible, I think it was a CAF aircraft.
Yeah, that's again, Bill Shepard with the CAF kind of wrangled the aircraft for us for the Sweetwater scene, and I think a lot of them were CAF, but I know some of them were not. And the travel air that we got is also not CAF. As much as we could, we reached out to the CAF and we're like, what airplanes can we shoot? So they kind of provided us with what we can use.
Well, it's obvious that an hour is not enough time to talk about making. No, it's all good. It's been a great behind the scenes, behind the curtains peek at filmmaking, and the passion that you guys have for what you've done and the detail you've put into it, and the fact that you've done such a great job educating and honoring and inspiring, which is what the CAF is all about. So Adam, Kara, it's just been such a pleasure talking with you today, and I look forward to seeing the film again and getting a chance to talk with you guys, and who knows what's next. That's a whole nother dialogue to have on what's next after this.
yeah, we are excited about projects in the works. So
Great, great. And to our audience, thank you guys so much for joining us today. And we're going to have more webinars scheduled and posted. So just take a look at the CAF website, commemorativeairforce.org. Look on the education page and you'll find what's next. So thank you guys. And we're going to finish up just in time to go see the launch because it looks like that still may be happening. And then at 5:00 p.m., we'll get a chance to have a live chat with General McGee. That'll be a lot of fun too.
Excellent.
very
All right,
cool.
thank you.
We'll be watching that.
Of Super Bowl fame.
Super Bowl fame.